Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Um, I'm Rory Litwin. Welcome to our webinar, The Change We Seek, Understanding Every Library's Work for Libraries, um, which will be hosted by John Chrastka. I guess technically I'm the host, John is the presenter. Um, I'm the owner of Library Juice Academy, which invited John to do this webinar to give people a more in-depth sense of what every library does. We're a big supporter of every library. We do an annual challenge grant to encourage people to donate to every library. And we've also experimented with offering online classes for people to support what every library does. Um, our host, as I mentioned, is John Chrastka. John is the founder and executive director of Every Library, which is the first super PAC for libraries. Since 2012, Every Library has provided pro bono support to 62 library communities with ballot measures and tax referendum, helping to win over $210 million in stable tax funding. He is a former board president of the Berwyn, Illinois Public Library and RAILS, the Reaching Across Illinois Libraries system. Prior to Every Library, he was a partner in Associa Direct, an association consultancy, and was director of membership development at ALA. He is a 2014 LJ mover and shaker, and he tweets at Every Library. Um, Very happy to have John here. John, why don't you take it from here?
Rory, thanks so much, and thanks to Library Juice Academy for this longtime partnership. We were really thrilled in March to be able to put out another challenge donation campaign from you guys, and to find a bunch of folks who wanted to show up and match that donation that you guys provided. It's a capacity builder for us. It lets us bring in individuals who are interested in providing, $5, $10, $20 a month, and to be able to have that match coming in from you guys as a small independent press and a small independent publisher of content for the library community is a big deal for us. It's a real honor to be here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about our work. As we get into this conversation, it's when we're recording here, it's the first week of April 2017. So the date in time, the moment in time that we're talking, is an important one to consider. There's a lot of activity happening on local ballots that we're focusing on as an organization. There's a lot of activity that's on pause right now in a certain respect for school library communities around the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, the implementation at the state level for ESSA. There's a lot of activity happening right now in our world, our library world, around the IMLS and the funding threat that is coming from the Trump budget and the Ryan and McConnell approach to things in the Congress. It's a moment in time, though. It's important for us to talk about where we've been over the course of the last 4.5 years and where we're trying to operationalize a project that will make substantive change happen at the local and state level for library funding as we move forward. At this moment in time, as Rory said a moment ago, we're at 62 campaigns to date and 47 wins. That's an exciting number for us. It's $220 million in stable tax funding. Rory, I apologize for not giving you that extra 10, actually 10.3 million last night in Villa Park, Illinois. Villa Park, Illinois is a suburb of Chicago. It's a small town. Folks, drive to downtown. They drive to different parts. It's kind of a bedroom community, and yet the library is at the heart of their right across the railroad tracks from the little bit of downtown that they've got there. The library's been around forever. The library needs some sincere renovations, and the library community there, the leadership team there, instead of going for patches, instead of going for bubble gum and for duct tape, they went for a $10.3 million upgrade, renovation, and a renewal of the library in the community for its educational outcomes, its business anchor that it is, the business development anchor that it certainly does through its services, as a heart of the community. So when we're talking about the kind of work that we do day to day, the heart of our work is with these library campaigns. Likewise, we've got a broader portfolio when it comes to how we want to support the library community beyond these particular campaigns. We do a lot of support as an organization for negotiations that have to take place between a library community and a funding partner. The library community and a funding partner might be a situation like in Miami-Dade County, where a few years ago the mayor of Miami-Dade County wanted to cut the library budget from $44 million down to $22 million. He didn't think there'd be any resistance. He wanted to be able to find a new pot of money in the county budget for Miami-Dade that was shaped like a cut to the library. Well, the local folks there didn't want that to happen. The library leadership team didn't want that to happen. We were brought in by the Friends of the Library and a few other local stakeholders to build a coalition to save Miami-Dade County libraries. And that coalition was intended, and it was successful in trying to reverse those cuts with a negotiation, not just with the mayor, who is a legitimate stakeholder in that process, but also with the rest of the county commission. And not just those elected officials, but with the rest of the ecosystem of education in Miami-Dade County, the rest of the ecosystem about business development, and about the arts, and about culture, and about tourism. To have a conversation, to have a negotiation with those folks, actually, we did better than just reverse the cuts. We actually helped them get another $8 million added to the budget. It was 44. Coming out of that negotiation, it was $52 million. That new capacity for negotiations and lobbying support is something that we're certainly interested in doing around the country, and it's not just with public libraries. We've been working with the school library community in a number of places to help advance a policy agenda as part of a negotiation. With the changes to ESSA, with the changes to from No Child Left Behind now into the ESSA environment, the Every Student Succeeds environment, well, really prior to this, to Secretary DeVos and President Trump, there's a movement among the school library community to add discussions about an effective school library program and the role of a school librarian in the curriculum, in the whole life of the child, in the academic achievement matrix for each of those schools, as a partner with the other faculty in terms of educator effectiveness. When I say before Secretary DeVos and President Trump, I say that sincerely because all of the states right now are reeling a bit from the fact that the Congress and the Department of Education and the administration has repealed some of the key provisions of the ESSA rules-making regime, part of the negotiation that went on at a federal level. A lot of the states are taking a deep breath right now and pausing to see whether or not how they want to proceed. And we'll talk about that more at the end towards the end of this conversation. EveryLibrary is also set up to do a lot of direct support to the policy environment and to the thought leadership environment around what it means to be politically active in the library community. We do a lot of trainings. We do a lot of coaching. We talk to state associations and state library communities all the time. At the local level, we're working with systems, we're working with individual libraries, we're down at the individual zip code level. We also want to advance a policy discussion. We have our journal, The Political Librarian, which is intended to do policy work, tax policy, public policy for libraries. Let's think through what it looks like in this new environment, this new policy environment for libraries. All of the work that we do is pro bono. All the work that we do is donor supported. So that total of 62 campaigns, as I mentioned before, and the 47 wins to date has all been done with pro bono for those library communities. The work that we've been doing to advance that policy framework for school library communities has been done pro bono as a donor-supported activity. We're very lucky at EveryLibrary to have two types of donors. One is the individuals who come in and provide us with either one-time or ongoing support. The one-time support averages out to be about $48.50 per person per year. You get a lot done on $48.50 per person per year if you had enough folks lined up to help support it. Likewise, our monthly donor subscription, as it were, comes in at about $7.40 some cents a month. It's edifying to me to be able to put an organization together where individuals who are librarians, library supporters, and just members of the public just folks around the country who hear our call to action and want to respond are coming in at those kinds of levels of support. Likewise, our donors like Library Juice Academy, like Mango Languages and EBSCO and DEMCO, folks like Rosen Publishing who've been there since the beginning, Bywater Solutions. I've got a nice list of corporate supporters within the library community, and they come in at about an average of $4,600 a year. With that kind of activity, with that kind of support, and I want to be very transparent about where our money comes from. We have a GuideStar profile. A lot of political action committees, a lot of super PACs don't do their GuideStar profile, or they're not in a foundation center willingly. We want to be very transparent with where the money comes from because we're very transparent about where the money goes. We spend money to build voter support for libraries. We spend money to win local library elections. We spend money to advance a policy framework that includes the future of libraries in law and in regulation. All right. How do we do that? Well, a little bit of a dive into what we know to be true about how Americans think about libraries, about how voters think about libraries. Even more importantly than just regular Americans, we're mostly concerned with voters because voters are either going to actuate that vote, like in Villa Park last night with a 64% win, or they're going to actuate a no vote, like in Plainfield last night, with a 65% loss. That actuation comes from attitudes that are bigger than library use. They are not tied to library user status. They are not part of somebody coming in and saying, I need a book on, I want a movie about, I want to hang out and read the newspaper, I want to come to a program, my kid's here to learn how to read. Most of the voters that we're dealing with are folks who haven't been to the library in an awfully long time. And they sort out like this. About 37% of American voters will definitely vote yes for the library. That is way below 50% plus one that is necessary to win an election in Illinois, where I live, or in California, where you need 66.7%, where Library Juice Academy is headquartered. 66.7% of the voters, we would have lost Villa Park. We would have lost Villa Park last night if it was a California campaign, now that I think about it out loud. 37%, though, of the American voting public who would like to be activated for library issues as a voter, as a constituent, if we've got to help with a negotiation, to go before city council, to stand up to your state legislature, to come up and talk to Congress. 37% of the American voting public believes in their heart, their head, or their gut that the library and the librarians matter, and that they should have the funding they need or the support that we should all be giving. There's another 37% of the American public who are swing voters. They are not necessarily going to vote yes. They probably will vote yes, provided that they've been given a chance to ask and answer some questions. To be provided with some answers, legitimate answers to legitimate questions that they have about where is their money going and who is spending their money, and how the library campaign, the library building plan, the library budget discussion is different than every other crazy-ass tax measure in my town, my state, or across this country. There's another 26% of the American voting public who ain't going to vote for us. Well, they're probably not going to. And these days, with the tone and tenor of the electorate being what it is, I'm going to put them more in the definite no category. They are folks who, well, the philosophy of government, the approach to policy that funds libraries comes from a progressive tax policy. We choose to tax property, we choose to tax parcels, we choose to do sales or use taxes to fund the common good. Well, there's a chunk of Americans who don't believe, well, they believe that any tax is a bad tax. They believe that any tax is a bad tax to the point where, like the Koch brothers last night in Plainfield, the Koch brothers came out again against the library in Plainfield through the Americans for Prosperity super PAC that they run. It's not even a super PAC. We're a super PAC. They're a mega PAC. They came out against it not because of the library plan for the community, not because this plan in 2017 was the right size for the community. It wasn't because no, any tax is a bad tax. We're going to take out robocalls. We're going to do direct mail against the library because it's an ideology. They believe in their heart, their head, or their gut that any tax is a bad tax, the government should be shrinking, that we don't have a role for the common good necessarily that's taxpayer supported. It should all be charitable. I respectfully disagree. And one of the reasons we started this political action committee is that we are interested in advancing the common good. And how do we find those people who are also interested in the common good? Let me tell you about what we know. As a political action committee, it's been active now for about 4.5 years with 62 campaigns, library campaigns, election days under our belt, and a bunch of negotiations that have gone on around the country for the future of the profession and the future of funding for those local library campaigns. There are 4 things that we know that are challenges that we're trying to address as an organization. And I want to frame this conversation about what we know based on what the challenges are that we're trying to address, because if we don't overcome them, you've got situations like Plainfield or Meridian, Idaho, where unfortunately the Tea Party of Idaho has come out against that library campaign twice. They're trying to build 2 new buildings in Meridian, Idaho, the fastest growing community in the state. 2 new buildings to anticipate the growing and changing community that they're serving with distinction right now, but they're a little landlocked. The Tea Party comes out against them. We've got situations where the local watchdog in town wants to burn the place down and is going to take it out on the library. And I mean that very sincerely. There's some folks who, what are you against today, Carl? What are you against today, Karen? They're against whatever you got. We need to address these challenges as an organization, and we need your support and involvement in order to address these challenges. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole series of, well, if not cuts, diminishments. If not diminishments and cuts, perhaps closures. We've got a situation right now happening in Douglas County, Oregon. Douglas County, Oregon voted no on their library measure to set up a special taxing district because the county commissioners there said they were out of money. And legitimately they are. It's a very depressed area, post-timber industry. Federal subsidies are declining. There is a real depression or recession happening in Douglas County, Oregon, and yet the voters there decided against voting yes for the library. It's a real matrix of reasons why there, but it's something that needs to be overcome with both the philosophy of government that talks about the common good, but the hope, person to person, transmitted person to person, about what the library can do in those communities. The challenges that we address every day as an organization, as the first national political action committee for libraries, include these 4 things. And I'm going to be one of those people who reads the slide at you for a second because I need to. Nostalgia motivates our core voters. It's a huge challenge because it's aging out of the population. The questioning and suspicious voters, those middle 37% of people, are the key to our success. If 37% of people believe and 26% of people don't believe in taxes for the common good and for the library, the way you make up the shortfall to get to 50% plus 1 in Illinois or 66.7% in California is with those suspicious and questioning voters. The librarians in this whole mix, one of our challenges is that the librarians are the accidental candidate in any funding discussion. It might be the election, it might be a negotiation, it might be restoring a position to that school. And there's a low level of political literacy in our industry. And I'm going to be really frank with you about that. The low level of political literacy in our industry is a problem, and it actually starts not with knowing how a bill becomes a law, or how an ordinance is passed, or how a budget is set, though that is a component. But part of the low level of political literacy is the need to understand that in a political fight of ideas, like in a political fight of personalities, you have to engage the opposition. And you have to talk about what you believe. And you have to be willing to be loud about it. One of the first things we want to teach is how to be active. The political action part of our work is sometimes more important than the political part of our political action work. Getting librarians to move, getting librarians to do, that's what I'm talking about. Let me dive into this just a little bit more. What we know, nostalgia motivates our core voters. Nostalgia is our friend because these people are not necessarily coming into the library and they're registered to vote. They're not necessarily coming into the library and they're responding to an appeal that we have for our annual donation campaign as a library group. Our friends are our foundation. They're not necessarily coming into the library, and they're certainly not changing their media consumption habits based on our marketing. We know from Pew, the Pew Research Service has provided us an insight going back years and years and years. The stability of the number of people in this country who have a library card, which floats between 50 and 60%. That's very stable. It means that between 40 and 50% of our community, of our neighbors across America, aren't going to come in. And we've got a problem, though, as every library sees it, with the fact that the nostalgia is aging out of our population. Part of the nostalgia that folks have is not for their public library, but it's for their school librarian. The school librarian in their lives when they were kids. I'm 47 years old almost. The school librarian in my life is a point of nostalgia for me. My kids, they've got a nice person at their school right now who helps them with checking out books, but she's not a librarian and she doesn't pretend to be. My kids right now, as they get older and they are a couple years away from being a voter, will join a cohort of voters who, during No Child Left Behind, had no school librarians in their lives. We need to do a lot of marketing, and expensive marketing, to be able to overcome that lack of nostalgia. We still have the opportunity to activate it, and from a policy perspective, to restore school librarians to the schools is necessary for the outcomes that happen in schools for student learning, and it doesn't hurt one bit to have a cohort of school librarians there building new nostalgia. What we do as every library is train people locally on these campaigns in one zip code for one school district for a multi-county public library system. We train them on how to talk to the nostalgia and how to update the nostalgia. We teach them how to do that from things as simple as humanizing their social media. People like their librarians of their youth. Let's tell them about the librarians of today. They'll find something to resonate with. We teach them how to do it in ways that are not necessarily campaigning, though that mimic campaigns. Library card sign-up month, doing it door to door. Knocking on somebody's door and saying, "Hi, I'm John, I'm your librarian, here's my business card. Do you need a library card?" It's shocking what happens when you meet somebody face to face and talk to them about the work that you do. Likewise, how to do survey work. I mean, everybody's got to do a survey. You got to do surveys and reporting all the time. Well, let's do a survey door to door. Let's do it at the feed store if you're out in the rural community. Let's do it at the vet clinic. Let's do it at the Target, the Osco, the Costco, where you pick the place. I'm cool with it. "Hi, I'm John. I'm your librarian. Here's my business card. I need to chat with you for a minute about our strategic plan. I know you haven't been to the library since you were a kid. I've never seen you before in my entire life, and yet your opinion about what the library does matters." We teach that at the local level, and then at the national level, we as an organization work to try and move the needle on nostalgia as well. Every library spends a bunch of money every week, every day, on ad-supported social media outreach about the value of libraries and the value of librarians, of which the nostalgia is certainly there. The value proposition that we give out to the public varies from week to week and day to day. We've got a whole bunch of media a whole bunch of demographic channels segmented. It's smart money that we spend every week. At least I'd like to think so. And I like to think so because what we're floating out there sometimes is a unique discussion. And what we're putting out there is ad-supported. We pay to put it in front of people. We pay to put it in front of people in local campaigns all the time. Vote Yes for the Villa Park Public Library. We donated money so that they could put it in front of people on Facebook and by the yard signs. The broader campaign of Vote Libraries, during the 2016 presidential primaries and general elections, we paid to put that in front of Americans around the country. We spend money to get likes on the Every Library page because that means that we can reach more humans when there's both a crisis and an opportunity for library funding. The IMLS crisis right now, our social media reach on our Facebook page is about 150,000 people, which translates into paid reach of about 1.5 million Americans. To be able to take that and grow it is our goal. We would like to see more like 3 million Americans, not as social media reach, but in our list. We would like to be able to get Bernie-sized numbers. We'd like to get NRA-sized numbers. We'd like to get ACLU-sized numbers for libraries. Our work as a national organization is focused on building that list out. And I can tell you today, on our reachable social media, it's 150,000 people. On our emailable list, which is much more of an active way to convert people to answer a crisis or to develop a new opportunity, that's more like 112,000 people. I'd like to see 250 by the time 2017 is over. I'd like to see 3 million by 2020. Okay, back to the challenges. How do we address the questioning or suspicious voter? How do we, as Every Library, move the needle so people become aware of what the answers are, perhaps even before they've asked the question about where their money's going and who's spending their money? This is a local library campaign. This is why do we need a school librarian in that biggest classroom in the school? This is the negotiation that happens with a town board, a city council, or a county commission. A lot of it's local. Most of what we do, we don't have a national face on this one because it's always peculiar to the local town. What are they suspicious of, and what validates their suspicion? Quite frankly, what they're suspicious of is how everybody else spends taxes. What validates their suspicions is if we, as a library community, don't go out of our way to demonstrate the legitimacy of the planning process. The open, transparent, and consultative nature of our work needs to be front and center, even if those suspicious voters don't participate in it. The work that we do locally extends to training our colleagues in library leadership, the boards, the staff at all levels. The frame that a suspicious voter has, well, what answers their questions about where's my money going and who's spending my money is that they have to see if there's a difference between, honestly, what happens if it passes and what happens if it fails. Too often, library communities talk about aspirations as if the nobility of the aspiration was enough to carry the day. For those believers, that 37% of people who believe strongly, that's great. They love aspiration. Talk to them all day about hope. But for the suspicious voter who helps us win elections and tip the funding negotiation with elected officials, what happens if it fails? What happens if we don't get it? What happens if it goes away? To have that honest conversation about if you have a structural deficit and you can't do pre-K anymore, if you have a structural deficit and you cannot do business development and business reference or workforce development, if you have a structural deficit and you can't be the community hub because you got to be closed 2 or 3 days extra a week, or if you have a deficit with your structure, your roof leaks, you got to tell people what happens if you can't get the roof fixed. That one's easy. But plan A, what's our hope with this new funding? Plan B, what's going to be still the problem that we can't fix? Aside from a Douglas County, Oregon, which we unfortunately lost last November, along with a Jeanette, Pennsylvania, which we won, those were the 2 libraries that were on the ballot last year that we worked with that we're going to close. Jeanette is open still, thank goodness. Plan B didn't have to happen there. Plan B right now in Douglas County is pretty stark. Plan B for Villa Park, where it was a $10.3 million investment last night the community decided to make. Plan B was more chewing gum and duct tape to carry a limping building forward and a diminished opportunity to do education, business development, workforce, and community growth. We change things when we work with a library community from, and I'm not throwing any shade on Mid-Continent Public Library, they do beautiful communications, but prior to the campaign discussion, it was a lot of stats in their annual report. It was a lot of stats, which is cool, and they also told stories. I'm not suggesting they didn't. Steve Potter, the director there, Jim Staley, the marketing manager, or marketing director, fantastic storytellers. And yet the difference between this set of stats and some stories about changing lives and this stark discussion on election day or budget day between what happens if you vote yes and what happens if you vote no is the thing that convinces voters and moves the conversation forward. For us to be able to do that locally is the core and the heart of our work. Because voters want to know, they deserve to know. Our thesis is you got to tell them both. Because one thing's going to happen on election day and the other thing won't. All right, the third challenge that we try and address as Every Library. Right now we are addressing this third challenge mostly at the local level, and we're trying to figure out how to address it at the national level. We're trying to figure out how to address it on a state-by-state, multi-state level. The accidental nature of the candidacy of the librarian. What we know from the same study that gave us the 37% who believe, the 37% who ask and answer questions, and the 26% who say no, OCLC, From Awareness to Funding, 2007, 2008. It's a pre-Obama, pre-Trump sample. It needs to get rerun. I hope that we can see it be rerun. We've also had some opportunity to validate it in polls and surveys around the country for these local campaigns. One of the key findings for that 37, 37, and 26% thing is that the factors that determine a resident's willingness to support an increase in their own taxes are their perceptions and attitudes about the institution and the people who work there. 2007, 2008, the perceptions and attitudes about the library and the librarian. We've got a great ability inside this industry to talk about the institution. We have a hell of a time talking about ourselves. And for us to be able to change that locally is to be able to bring the librarians and through either directly or through their representatives out into the community more, not to serve, but to talk about the transformational work that they do there. But nationally, to be able to update an image about the library, that is being done with a few different groups, other organizations. Great. Who's talking about the librarian? We are trying to figure out, and I'm being really honest with you here, at Every Library, we're trying to figure out how to talk about the librarian. That's an area that we need your help with. That's an area that we need support to do. That's an area that we need polling and testing and focus groups because it's a big marketing thing. For us to be able to talk about the library is easy. For us to be able to talk about the librarians requires you guys to want to participate. We know, and our thesis for every single campaign that we run, whether there's an election day or a budget negotiation day on a city council's part, or if the school board's got to make a decision about money, that means staffing. The librarian is the candidate in the race because people look to the librarian. They look to the transformational work that the librarians do. That the library itself, we know this to be the case. This is our thesis. The library itself is the incumbent in the race. Fundamentally, an incumbent says one of two things. The incumbent in the race is talked about in one of two ways. They talk about themselves by saying, re-elect me, I will take care of you, I will do more of the same. If you're running against the incumbent, you say about the incumbent, get rid of that shyster, put me in here instead, I'll take care of you. For a library campaign, to be able to say the librarians need these resources. For a budget discussion, to be able to say our staff needs these resources. For a negotiation around a school librarian position, that we need this staff member in this biggest classroom in the school to actuate this change for our students, that's the candidate. But from the incumbent side of things, what have you done for me lately? This election for the library, re-elect us as a library, we will do more of the same. New money extends our success. Likewise, there's a boldness that's necessary for a library community to run against itself, to be honest with its voters, to be honest with its elected officials, to say new money fixes problems is a key conversation to have in an environment that's politically charged as it is right now. It's a necessary one to have in an environment that says any tax is a bad tax. It's a necessary thing to be able to say new money extends our success, here's how. New money fixes problems, here's how. In an environment where people want to see some leverage come from their taxes. If you're the candidate, though, the training that we do as Every Library, the work that we're trying to do trying to figure out for the national picture of librarianship, how does a candidate come to be surfaced? How do you come to understand that this person can viably run for president? Well, there's a process, and it often starts. There's a deep dive here that we could do if we were actually working with you on a campaign. But the top level process starts with writing the book. The marketing that you start with as a candidate is writing the book. We see it in libraries all the time. There's a ton of books out there. Crippled America, How to Make America Great, and Hard Choices by Hillary Rodham Clinton were the two that rose to the surface. Our thesis about the librarian as candidate means that we want to be able to equip the library communities to talk locally about taxes in a way that is as powerful as the vision in those two books. We believe at Every Library that you've already got your marketing material set up. You've already got your book. You have a strategic plan that should have the hope and vision for tomorrow for your library in it. It should be a fundable strategic plan, and there should be a difference in the plan between Plan A and Plan B. And if you don't have the strategic plan, that's cool. What's your management plan? If you don't have a management plan that really has that vision and hope embedded in it, what's your service plan? What's your development plan? What are your fundraising goals? What's your finance? Show me your budget. In that, we tend to not title our strategic plans in the way that we should, in my opinion. The approach that I believe that we should be taking is to title the strategic plan Dreams for My Hometown Library. It takes a village with the library at the center of it. Make this town great again. That kind of an approach is something that we try and teach every day. And the last thing that we're trying to solve for libraries as an organization is this political literacy shortfall, if you will. Why libraries lose locally is something that we need to dive into a lot more as a industry, as a profession, as a sector, whatever word you want to use about librarians talking to other librarians. Why libraries lose on election days generally shakes out to be the fact that there's no marketing being done. And when I say marketing, I mean informational campaigns on the part of the library, but I also mean get out the vote campaigns on the part of the citizens. Why do libraries lose sometimes when a negotiation, a perfectly reasonable budget request goes before city council or the town board? Is there a willingness to be a political actor? Because if you're sitting next to the dude with the cigar who runs public works, he sure is. And we leave the opposition alone too much. We let the opposition speak for itself without being answered by us too much. The shift is not to become partisan. It is not necessarily a Republican or Democrat idea. It's not necessarily a liberal and progressive idea, or liberal and progressive or conservative idea. It is one, though, about philosophy, about the community. And the ideas that need to get funded, the hope that needs to get funded, needs to be talked about when the opposition comes back and says, we have a different belief. Locally, understanding the opposition. We do a lot of this kind of work. We do inventories with local library communities. We work with the community in order to figure out where the problems are, and then we try and surface solutions that are shaped like the librarians who are the candidate, that are shaped like the library's record as an incumbent, that are shaped like the citizens who go out and literally knock on the door. Hi, I'm John. I'm with the local library committee. Let me tell you why I'm campaigning today in the rain. We have a belief and we have a hope about our library. Will you join me in that? There are some really very specific reasons, and on a local level, when we come in and do pro bono consulting with the library community, when we provide that free support as a tactical and a strategic partner with the library community on their funding needs, we go into a very deep dive on all of these different areas about the anti-taxes of bad tax groups, the local watchdogs, how are the local politicians feeling about you. Nationally, what we want to be able to do as every library, and what we want to be able to put out to the American public, is a narrative that engages the opposition. Because right now they're winning. Right now they're potentially going to be winning. The negotiation point with President Trump and the Congress about IMLS is that they're giving us nothing. And from a philosophical perspective, they love libraries, they say, in their Republican Study Commission or in their Ryan's America or the Ryan budget the last couple of years. They just think it should be funded privately. They should think it shouldn't be a part of the federal government. That's cool, I guess. If we let it, it'll happen. If we don't do anything about it, it'll just happen on our watch. No, we have to engage that opposition, not just from a call Congress perspective, but a philosophy of government, a philosophy about public policy, a public policy framework that says public funding for the common good. We're doing this right now in places like Plainfield. The last couple of days when the Koch brothers showed up on Thursday with robocalls and Friday with direct mail, and then Saturday, Sunday, and Monday with robocalls right before their election. We're providing strategic support to the local community in the form of counter ads. Counter advertising in a crisis costs some money. Prepping the community in advance of the crisis also costs some money. to be able to engage the opposition where it matters, which is about ideas, philosophy, and hope. Nationally, we're putting that to work, I think, every day. Our action agenda as we move forward into 2017, or move through 2017 into 2018. I want to share a little bit more about us as a national organization. The first National Political Action Committee for Libraries, a 501c4 super PAC for libraries.
Could I jump in a sec?
We've got a few things that we're looking to do. Oh, of course.
I'm hoping we'll have a few minutes for questions before the end of the hour, so I just want to see if you're on track to give that time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, just checking. We've had a couple questions, but okay.
Great.
I'll get out of the way here.
Good. Well, Roy, let me get to the chat box. Forgive me, I had it closed because I have a hard time keeping one eye on one thing and one eye on the other. So, do you want to go through the questions for me, and we can talk about the bigger agenda stuff in just a moment?
Sure. There have been a couple questions that have come in, and if we allow a separate time for it, there may be a couple more. Jolanta asks.
Okay, great. Let me give a. Great. Let me give a few more little points here, and then encourage folks, if you've got anything else for the chat box, please put it in the chat box. I'll be right back to you in just 3 or 4 more minutes, okay?
Sounds great.
Great. So, our work in 2017 is focused on a couple of different top-level items, and it's all on our EveryLibrary.org website, but our core work is on ballot campaigns that renew or extend the basic funding formula for libraries. That's key for us to be able to be talking about, because the shift in the federal government, the shift away from having parts of the federal government funding local activities is happening. It's a new kind of federalism that is happening in D.C. If they start shutting down funding for education, which they're promising right now in the Trump budget to cut 13%, of the Department of Education's budget and reallocate it within the existing funding within the department, if they're going to shift away from doing community development block grants, if they're going to shift away from funding some workforce development stuff, the local library is going to have to pick up a lot more weight. And it's not just about IMLS, it's about everything else that government does. That, as a unit of government, libraries are often that government of last resort. The folks who work in a library know what I'm talking about. The folks who work in a library know that we need to start anticipating that, and EveryLibrary is here to stand with you when there is an opportunity to bring forward a ballot measure or a negotiation that solidifies, improves, or extends your funding. Our other top-level work is to continue to build out that unique and extensive network of Americans who are interested in being activated, those believers. The action.everylibrary.org site is set up to be able to do that. We want people to become not just advocates, but activists for libraries. And on our action.everylibrary.org site, we run petitions, we run email campaigns, where we're trying to get folks to take an action at a local zip code level for one school librarian. Or with a policy framework at a state level for things like transparency about political donations, which is what we're doing in Illinois. Or nationally to put out a call to action that says IMLS, NEA, NEH, PBS, these things matter in the lives of Americans. We're also working on doing a lot of new coalition work that brings librarians outside of our regular silos and into different conversations with stakeholder groups. We want to be able to bring these librarians out and our organization out to build power, quite frankly, because our agenda items are also their agenda items. The vice versa on it means it's possible, though, to put out a call to action about cuts to IMLS, for example, that would negatively impact services to the blind and visually impaired through the Talking Books library programs around the country. To be able to put that out in our own library networks, that's fine, but to be able to talk to partners in organizations that work with the blind and visually impaired, that work with the disability community, that moves our issue bigger than just within the library ecosystem. We're doing a lot in 2017 and 2018 right now to do this kind of coalition work, and we need your help and involvement. The National Disability Voter Registration Week is happening in July. We're partnering on this as part of our voter rights and ballot access platform. Money in politics is an area that we're extremely concerned about, and a lack of transparency from folks like the Koch brothers. Well, we want to change the rules. For the Koch brothers to come into Plainfield and spend a ton of money on robocalls and direct mail, well, they really should be disclosing, well, it's not just the Koch brothers, it's the whole Americans for Prosperity network. They should be disclosing their donors. And we are hoping to advance a bill that would require us, every library, as a 501c4, to do more disclosure, and therefore folks like the Koch brothers funded Americans for Prosperity PAC 2. We're looking at ways to advance a literacy, education, and lifelong learning platform that isn't about praxis, but it's about capacity building for other organizations. The Books with Barbara's program, doing prison library supports, isn't about us teaching librarians how to be better at their jobs. It's about us building capacity with other organizations outside of it. And we're also trying to address things like civil society and the teaching of civics, the humanity of people who use the library every day. We're a founding member of the One America Coalition, which is focused on trying to block and defeat the Muslim registry. Because, quite frankly, we're trying to be decent human beings to our neighbors. We've got a broader coalition agenda that we're still bringing online as this year and next year progresses. There's a lot to be done, and we should certainly work on this together. There's a few places that we're broadening our work. The school library community. When you think about every library, initially, a lot of people think about elections and negotiations. The school stuff is where it's at. The school stuff at a local district level, at a school level, at a statewide level for the policy agenda that makes sure that effective school library programs are funded, that there's a collection that supports the curriculum, that there's a school librarian staffing the largest classroom in the school. We're working on statewide partnerships with a few state school library associations on the ESSA, the ESSA implementation, and on some particular policy asks, like there's a bill in the Nevada State Senate right now, SB 143, that would require a school librarian in every school in Nevada. We're getting behind that. We're working to reach Nevadans. The Nevada Library Association, the Clark County School Library Association, they're working on professionals. We want to hit people across Nevada with a message that says, what if? What if? There's a few places for us to look ahead, I think, that every library is trying to anticipate. As this year progresses, as the Trump administration moves forward, as Speaker Ryan and Majority Leader McConnell put a synthesized approach to the federal budget together, and tax reform and other policy and regulatory issues, we truly believe at every library that the action is going to be shifting from the federal to the state level, and that state and local and state is going to be more and more important for libraries, not just to receive the unfunded mandates that are going to come when the federal government shrinks a bit and state government gets more burden and local government gets overworked because of less money and fewer resources, because the folks who are in charge don't necessarily like government. We believe in the new federalism that the local and state issues, which they keep pushing down, saying that it's up to the states, it's up to the cities and the localities, we have to take them up on that offer. They're in charge for the next several years. We might not like it. I might not like it personally. It's a different model of America than I voted for personally. And yet, where is it going to happen? It's going to happen in the State House. It's going to happen in city councils, town boards, county commissions. We want to get libraries ready to respond, not just respond, but to get ahead of it. To be able to get ahead of it is more than just IMLS and the innovative approaches to literacy, though that is an existential crisis right now and a tactical one. Everybody needs to be on this through the channels that they want to pursue. The ALA calls to action right now, the American Library Association calls to action right now about the Dear Appropriator letters here during the first week of April. Fantastic. Contact Congress. And then help us build more outreach to the public as well. What happens when the federal government shrinks? How do we help you as an organization? How does every library help your library get ahead of it when you're going to need to pick up more slack on pre-K? You're going to need to pick up more slack on workforce development. You're going to need to pick up more slack in social services and healthcare. That at your school level, if we can't get the school librarians in there to help change the outcomes for these kids, we got a couple things that we want to do with y'all. Connect with us on Facebook. Connect with us on Twitter. We're at Every Library everywhere. Tumblr, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the next new one is, we'll be there. Connecting with us is important because you can hear the calls to action, and we can help model some of these changes. The bigger thing, though, is getting onto the action.everylibrary.org site and taking an action, becoming an activist, moving beyond advocacy for libraries to stand with and stand up. There's also our donation site, and I'm asking for donations, and I appreciate Rory and his team at Library Juice Academy for being that kind of a sponsor already. We can't get the pro bono work done if we're not donor supported. Also, and last thing, is if you have an idea, if you have a policy idea or a tax policy idea or an activism idea, we want to be able to help share it. We want to help be able to publish it. We've got our open scholarship journal at Washington University in St. Louis. We take opinion pieces, white papers. We also have a peer-reviewed environment. We want to be able to advance some ideas because right now, if we don't advance some ideas, all we're doing is reacting. Finally, to be able to connect with us personally for a crisis that you're going through or an opportunity you're looking to explore. For us, Every Library is ready to work with you on a negotiation with your city council, your town government, your county commission. We're ready to work with the school library community in your locality or in your state. We're ready to look ahead to ballot measures in 2018, 2019, 2020. Because if the more time we've got to plan and the more time we've got to work, we can activate those 37% of people who believe, and we can help assure that 37% of people with questions, that the answers that they're going to hear from their library community are legitimate and worth funding. Rory, thanks for the time. I hope we got a couple minutes here for questions.
Yeah, and since we have low attendance this time around, there aren't going to be a lot of questions. Thank you very much. That was a very substantive presentation. Do you want to look at the chat box and read these questions for yourself?
Yes. Sure, let me open that up. So Jolanta says, we have a vote coming up on May 1st. I hope to be able to talk to Patrick Sweeney soon, but what can you do for a little town like ours, around 9,000 voters with very low voter turnout? Our vote needs a 2/3 majority. We will put this to work with you. What can we do? The tactics are going to be relevant to your town. The strategy is to activate the believers through an informational campaign that talks about Plan A and Plan B, and a voter engagement campaign, like a get out the vote, like a knock on the door campaign, and to answer the questions that those suspicious voters have about how did you get there, where's their money going, who's spending their money. The tactics are going to be relevant to your town. In a 2/3 majority, that's 66.7%, we've helped communities from Nevada County over to down to Sacramento, down towards Santa Clara County. Excuse me, do it. There's no difference in geography. I'm glad you're reaching out to Patrick. Please do. Okay, the next question says, the stereotype and myth of the librarian and their role in the library continues to be a challenge. As an academic librarian, I encounter the same challenges. It definitely takes outreach and marketing to change that face. I completely agree. Lucy, thanks for saying that. We're working actually on a project with Aladdin, which is the Academic Library Development Network. I'm presenting in May with Scott Walter from DePaul University on how do we campaign essentially in the academic environment when a student funding election needs to help secure your library fees. How do we talk and negotiate with a provost or a chancellor or a dean, not just about the building and the collection, but about the work that you do? And how do we close the gap between the Ithaca study about what academic librarians say about themselves that was released just the other day, and the 2015 sample of what other faculty think of academic librarians. It's an area that's emerging for us as an organization, and I want to be able to work with folks like you who want to do something about it. We should chat. Okay, Eileen has the last question here. Librarianship is still a largely feminized profession. I'm curious if every library has any thoughts in regard to how sexism and public views of librarianship affect the candidacy of librarians. You know what? Old white guys are the biggest problem that we have in any community that we work with. As a white guy myself, I'm cisgendered. I'm straight. I'm them. I look like them. I'm not them. I'm the guy though that occasionally gets the carpetbagger comment. I'll take it. The biggest thing that we have to do with this industry is to confront the humanity of who works here, or to highlight the humanity of who works in libraries, to highlight the people who work in libraries, and to like, for us to be able to come against that is in my heart, and it is in my strategy. I do think it affects things. I do think the sexism in our communities affects things when it comes to talking about funding. The library directors that I've had to work with who've gotten the paternal pat on the head. We are here not to become the representative of the library, but we are here to help the candidate be confident on the stump, to be confident in his or her or his own abilities, to be articulate because we've already done some coaching about answering challenges, and to be there to, quite frankly, support. It's not an easy situation to talk about taxes to begin with. People get crazy when you talk about taxes, but if you add in the dumb white guys, the older dumb white guys, yeah, I don't have a fully articulated answer other than we're here to be able to not be the interlocutor, but to be the supporter of the candidate. Rory, we're about at time. Are there any other things popping up in your mind?
No, I think that's great. This has been recorded. I think it was a good presentation, and I hope we do it again.
Yolanda just said, I hope we'll be your next success story, us too. Um, we'd love to chat. Let Patrick know that you were on this webinar today, and I'm looking forward to hearing more of the details and helping you guys move it forward.
And
Rory, thanks so much, and thanks to Library Juice Academy for hosting this. You guys have been a great partner over the years, and this opportunity to put together this conversation today, to have it available as a webinar over the long term. Folks, Rory's helped us raise thousands of dollars in his challenge grants, and I really appreciate that, and truly want to honor it. So, Rory,
thank you.
thanks for your time
Looking
today.
forward to the next one.